Hello there, and welcome to the Sleep with Science channel. Before we get started, if you love exploring the depths of space as much as we do, take a second to like the video or subscribe. It's a simple action, but it helps the channel to reach more curious minds like yours. Now let's begin. Somewhere in the hush between one heartbeat and the next, tonight, we are going to sit with a question that has quietly troubled some of the greatest minds in physics. A question so simple a child could ask it, and so deep that even now, we are still circling its edges, like moths drawn toward a darkness that gives off no light at all. Here it is. If nothing, not light, not radio waves, not the faintest whisper of energy, can escape the crushing grip of a black hole, then how, in this vast and patient universe, does gravity itself manage to get out? How does a black hole reach across the emptiness and pull on a star 1,000 light-years away, when the very thing that should be carrying that pull, light itself, cannot climb out of the hole at all? Let that settle over you slowly, like snow falling in a place with no wind. Because if gravity is a message, a signal, some quiet form of information that must travel from one point in space to another, then it should obey the same laws as everything else. It should be trapped, silenced, swallowed whole. And yet, somehow, it isn't. Somehow, the darkest, most secretive objects in the cosmos still whisper their presence to everything around them, still bend the paths of planets and stars and light itself, still shape the invisible architecture of galaxies from somewhere deep inside a prison that lets nothing escape. Tonight, we will not rush toward an answer. We are simply going to let this mystery breathe. We are going to drift, slowly, through the quiet corridors of space and time, past dying stars and folding light, until the question itself becomes as familiar and as calming as your own breathing. There is no need to solve anything tonight. There is only the gentle unfolding of wonder, one soft thought at a time, carrying you further from the noise of the day and deeper into the stillness of the stars. Let your body sink a little heavier into wherever you are resting now. Let your shoulders forget the weight they have carried since morning. We begin, as we so often do, at the edge of something almost unimaginable, a boundary in space called the event horizon. Picture it, not as a wall, not as a surface you could touch, but as a horizon in the truest sense, a line beyond which no messenger, no particle, no photon of light, no matter how fast it travels, can ever return. Light moves through the vacuum of space at just over 186,000 miles every single second, fast enough to circle the entire Earth more than 7 times in a single breath you take right now. And yet, near a black hole, this impossible speed means nothing at all. Space itself becomes so violently curved, so completely folded in on itself, that every direction, every possible path a beam of light could take, leads only inward, deeper, downward, toward a singularity we do not yet understand. This is the strange stage upon which our question tonight quietly stands. Because gravity, as Einstein taught us gently, patiently, almost a century ago, is not truly a force reaching out across empty space at all. It is something far stranger, and far more beautiful. It is the shape of space itself. It is the curvature of the fabric that everything, every star, every planet, every breath of light, is resting upon. And a black hole does not need to send anything out from behind its horizon, because the bending was already there, already written into the geometry of space long before anything fell inside. The warp in spacetime reaches outward not as a signal escaping a prison, but as a shape that was already present, stretching quietly through the darkness long before the black hole ever finished forming. Rest with that thought for a moment, the way you might rest your hand against a cool window at night. There is a difference, a very old and very deep difference, between something being sent and something simply being. A whisper carried across a room is sent. But the shape of the room itself, the way the walls curve and lean, the way sound settles into its corners, that shape was always already there, waiting, before any whisper was ever spoken. Perhaps, tonight, Gravity is closer to that second kind of truth. Perhaps it never needed to escape anything at all, because it was never trapped in the way light is trapped. We are only beginning to trace the outline of this idea, drifting gently along its edges the way starlight drifts across 100,000 years of empty space before it ever reaches a human eye. There is no hurry here. Somewhere above you, right now, ancient light older than continents, older than oceans, older than the first quiet stirrings of life on this small blue world, is still falling softly through the dark, still arriving, still settling into folds of the night sky, of rooftops, of sleeping cities, of the quiet water in a glass left beside your bed. Everything you can see above you tonight, every last point of light, is a message from the past, still traveling, still finding its way to you across an ocean of years so wide the mind can barely hold it. And this, too, is part of our question. Because light needs time to arrive. Light needs a path, a journey, a beginning and an end. But gravity, strangely, quietly, does not seem to need any of that in quite the same way. A star does not wait for its pull to travel outward before the planets around it begin to move. The bending is already woven into the space the planets are sitting in, the way a blanket is already shaped by the weight of a sleeping body resting upon it, long before anyone else in the room notices the fold. Let your breathing slow now, in time with this thought. In and out, the way space itself seems to lean gently around anything with mass, without ever needing to ask permission, without ever needing to send a single messenger across the dark. Picture, if you can, a wide and endless sheet of black velvet, stretched taut between unseen hands, stars and planets resting upon it like small stones placed with great care. Where a stone rests, the velvet dips, ever so slightly, curling downward into a soft and gentle hollow. And any other stone rolled nearby will naturally drift toward that hollow, not because something reached out and pulled it, but because the shape of the ground beneath it had already changed. This is the picture Einstein gave us, patiently, a century ago, and it remains one of the gentlest gifts ever offered to human understanding. Gravity, in this picture, is not a rope thrown across space. It is the shape of the space itself, curling around anything heavy enough to leave an impression. And a black hole, in this same soft light, is simply where that impression grows so deep, so impossibly steep, that the velvet folds in on itself entirely, forming a well with no visible bottom, a silence so complete that even light, moving faster than anything else in the universe, cannot climb back out of it. And yet here is where the mystery deepens rather than dissolves. Because the curve in the velvet, the dip in the fabric, still reaches outward, still exists calmly beyond the place where light gives up and disappears. The shape does not need to escape, because the shape was never inside to begin with. It was always already spread across the space surrounding the black hole, the way ripples on a still pond spread outward from a stone long after the stone has sunk quietly to the bottom, unseen, while the ripples continue gently toward the shore. Let this image settle over you now, soft as a folded blanket pulled up to your chin. The stone is hidden. The ripple remains. Perhaps gravity is closer to the ripple than to the stone. Perhaps it is closer to an old shape in the water than to a new signal fighting to break free. And yet, even this gentle picture cannot hold every part of the puzzle, because the universe, in its quiet way, always leaves one more question resting just beneath the surface, waiting patiently for curious minds like yours. If gravity is truly only a fixed and settled shape, unchanging, already spread through space, then what happens when that shape itself needs to move? What happens when a black hole is not alone in the dark, but circles another, spiraling closer across millions of patient years, the two of them turning slowly around each other like dancers in a black and silent hall no human eye will ever witness directly? In such moments, physicists tell us, the shape of space does not sit still. It trembles, sending ripples, gravitational waves, through the fabric of the cosmos at the same speed as light, carrying news of that ancient dance across unthinkable distances, Until, more than 1 billion years later, the faintest tremor reaches an instrument resting here on Earth. So perhaps gravity is not one single thing at all. Perhaps it is both the ripple and the shape, the old curve resting patiently in space, and the new tremor racing outward to update it, each playing its own quiet part in a mystery still unfolding gently above your head, night after night, star after star, while you rest here, breathing slowly, drifting further into the soft and endless dark, carried along by a question that does not need to be solved tonight, only carried gently, the way a river carries a single fallen leaf without ever asking where it means to go. Somewhere, in an observatory built into a mountainside, an instrument waits in stillness for a tremor smaller than a single atom, born from 2 black holes colliding long before the first human ever wondered what the stars might be. And when that tremor arrives, softer than a whisper, it will have traveled farther and waited longer than almost anything you could hope to imagine, arriving here, now, for you, as your body grows heavier, as the mind loosens its grip on the day, sinking instead into this slow and patient darkness that asks nothing of you at all, only that you keep breathing, slowly, softly, while the universe continues doing what it has always done, quietly, patiently, without needing your attention or your understanding to keep unfolding. There is a strange comfort in that, if you let yourself feel it. The stars do not need you to name them in order to burn. The black holes do not need you to solve them in order to bend the space around them into deep, invisible wells. And yet, tonight, we keep gently circling this question, not because it demands an answer, but because the circling itself is soothing, the way tracing a familiar shape with a fingertip in the dark can calm a restless mind more than any answer ever could. So let us drift a little closer now, carefully, slowly, toward the heart of the matter itself, toward the singularity, that strange and almost unspeakable point at the very center of a black hole, where, according to our equations, all the mass of a collapsed star has been crushed down into a space smaller than anything we can properly imagine, smaller than a single point, infinitely dense, infinitely small. We do not fully understand what happens there. Even Einstein's own equations begin to falter and blur at the edges when they try to describe it, the way a familiar melody might dissolve into static the closer you try to listen to its very last note. And yet, strangely, wonderfully, we do not need to understand the singularity at all in order to understand the shape it leaves behind. This is one of the quiet, hidden mercies of gravity in Einstein's universe. A black hole, no matter how strange or violent its birth, no matter what kind of star it once was, a giant blue giant burning fast and bright, or a slow and ancient red star cooling for billions of years, settles, in the end, into something remarkably simple. Physicists have a phrase for this, spoken softly in lecture halls and in scientific papers alike. They call it the no-hair theorem. A black hole, once formed, forgets almost everything about its past. It forgets the colors of the star it once was. It forgets the elements that made it, the hydrogen, the helium, the iron gathered slowly across a lifetime of nuclear fire. All of that history, all of that story, is smoothed away, erased, folded into silence. What remains, resting quietly behind the event horizon, can be described by only 3 simple properties. Its mass, how much material it holds. Its spin, how quickly it turns in the dark. And, in rare and delicate cases, its charge, an electric imprint left over from its formation. That is all. 3 numbers, and nothing more, describing an object that may once have been a star larger than our own sun 100 times over. Let that settle over you now, the way fog settles over still water in the hour just before dawn. Something so complex, so violent, so filled with history, reduced in the end to only 3 quiet numbers, floating gently in the dark. And it is here, in this strange simplicity, that our question about gravity grows even more curious. Because if a black hole forgets everything else about itself, if it erases every trace of its past, why does it not also forget its mass? Why does it not also forget how to bend the space around it? Why, of all the things a black hole could lose in that final, crushing collapse, does gravity alone remain, patient and unbroken, reaching outward into the dark long after everything else has been silenced? Perhaps, and this is only a perhaps, gravity is not a piece of information at all, not a fact stored somewhere and later broadcast outward, but something closer to a boundary condition, a permanent feature of the space itself, something written into the very geometry of the universe rather than carried by it. The mass does not need to send a message saying, "I am heavy, please curve around me." The heaviness and the curving are, in some deep and gentle sense, the very same thing, seen from two different angles, the way a single quiet sound can be felt both as vibration in the air and as a soft hum resting in your chest. Rest with that thought now, as your body continues to grow heavier against whatever is holding you, the mattress, the chair, the soft weight of a blanket pulled close. There is no need to fully grasp this tonight. Only to let it drift near you, the way a single unfamiliar word might drift through a dream, meaningless and yet somehow deeply comforting all the same. Far above you, in the true and endless dark, countless black holes rest scattered across countless galaxies, each one silent, each one simple in the end, holding on to nothing but their mass, their spin, and the quiet shape they leave folded into space around them, long after the star that made them has been forgotten entirely, its color gone, its light gone, its name gone too, leaving only a still and patient curve in the dark, a single fact the universe refuses to let go of, resting quietly. Waiting, the way a slow, quiet, held breath waits softly there in the chest just before release finally comes, the way a tide waits at its highest point before it ever agrees to turn back toward the sea. Let yourself hold that stillness for a moment longer. There is no need to hurry toward anything tonight, not sleep, not understanding, not even the end of this thought. We are only drifting, slowly, through one soft idea after another, the way a single leaf drifts down a long and patient river without ever needing to know where the river ends. And now, gently, let us turn toward another strange and quiet corner of this mystery, a corner that has puzzled dreaming minds for over a century. Imagine, if you can, watching a star begin to collapse, falling in upon itself under the weight of its own gravity, shrinking, smaller and smaller, faster and faster, racing toward that final invisible boundary we now know as the event horizon. From far away, resting safely in the dark, you watch this collapse unfold. And here is where the universe begins to behave in a way that feels almost impossible, almost like a dream that refuses to end the way dreams usually do. As the surface of that dying star falls closer and closer to the horizon, time itself, from your distant point of view, begins to slow. Not the star's time. Not really. But the light leaving that star, climbing up and away from such powerful gravity, must fight harder and harder for every single second it travels, stretching, slowing, reddening, the way a tired swimmer moves more and more slowly the farther they swim against a current growing stronger with every stroke. And so, to you, watching quietly from a great and comfortable distance, the star never quite finishes falling in. It appears to freeze, hovering forever at the very edge of the horizon, its light growing dimmer and dimmer and dimmer still, sliding gently from white to gold to a deep and heavy red, fading slowly into a darkness so complete that within moments, to your eyes, it seems to vanish entirely, though it never technically finished crossing that final line at all, not from where you are resting, not in any time you could ever hope to measure. This is one of gravity's strangest and gentlest secrets. Perhaps, in some very real sense, nothing ever truly disappears behind a black hole at all, at least not to the universe watching from outside. Perhaps every collapsing star, every falling speck of dust, every doomed and drifting fragment of light, remains forever painted, faintly, impossibly, upon the very surface of the horizon itself, frozen there in an endless, silent photograph that time itself seems unwilling to finish developing. And if that is true, if the entire history of everything that ever fell into a black hole is somehow still resting, gently, upon its outer skin, then perhaps gravity does not need to escape from somewhere deep and hidden within the black hole at all. Perhaps it never had to travel from the crushed and silent center in the first place. Perhaps it was always simply resting there, on the surface, in the skin of the horizon itself, painted into the boundary the way frost paints itself quietly across a window overnight, without ever needing to come from somewhere deeper inside the glass. Let this thought settle over you now, slow and soft as falling snow. The horizon, that thin and trembling boundary between everything we can know and everything we cannot, may be less like a hole in the world, and more like a mirror or a skin, holding within its faint curvature the entire imprint of everything that has ever fallen toward it, quietly, patiently, forever. Physicists have another name for this strange and beautiful idea, a name that sounds almost like poetry when spoken softly in the dark. They call it the holographic principle, the notion that everything that could ever happen inside a certain volume of space might somehow be fully described, completely and perfectly, by information resting only on its outer surface, the way an entire and detailed world can be folded quietly into a single flat photograph, two dimensions somehow holding the full and complete memory of three. We do not yet know, not fully, not with certainty, whether this idea is the final truth of black holes, or only another gentle shadow cast by a deeper truth still waiting patiently to be found. But tonight, we do not need certainty. We only need the soft and drifting shape of the question itself, turning over slowly in your mind the way a single stone turns over gently at the bottom of a quiet stream, unseen, unhurried, resting in darkness that does not ask to be understood, only felt, only carried gently forward into the next slow breath, and the one after that, and the one after that, while somewhere far above you, ancient light continues its long and patient descent across the emptiness, falling gently through the dark, toward whatever quiet corner of the world you happen to be resting in tonight, carrying with it no urgency at all, only the slow, unbroken patience of something that has been traveling since long before you were born, since long before the ground beneath you had a name, arriving now, softly, quietly, without ever once asking anything at all of you in return tonight, the way a mother might place a hand upon a sleeping child's back without waking them, only checking, only confirming that the small breathing body beneath her palm is still warm, still present, still here. And so we return, gently, to the question that has followed us through the dark like a patient animal, soft-footed, unbothered by our uncertainty. Why can gravity escape a black hole when light itself cannot? We do not need the answer tonight. But we can let the shape of it settle over us like a second blanket, heavier than the first, warm in its own strange way. Light is a traveler. It moves through space the way a runner moves through a hallway, bound to a single corridor, unable to leave the track laid out before it. Even light, the fastest thing in all this vast and quiet universe, is still a thing that must go somewhere, must move from one point to another, must trace a path through the fabric of space in order to arrive. And near a black hole, that fabric folds in on itself so completely, so absolutely, that there is no path left to trace. Every direction curves inward. Every corridor leads only deeper. The runner does not slow down. The runner simply runs out of hallway. But gravity is not a traveler in the same way. Gravity, as we understand it now, is not a signal sent from one place to another, not a message passed hand to hand across the dark. Gravity is the shape of space itself. It is not something moving through the curved fabric of the cosmos. It is the curve. It is the fabric, remembering the weight it carries. Picture, if you can, in this soft and drifting quiet, a bedsheet pulled taut between gentle hands. Now picture a single heavy stone placed at its center, and the sheet bowing downward, gracefully, the way an old floorboard bows beneath years of quiet footsteps. A marble rolled nearby does not fall toward the stone because some invisible thread pulls it there. It falls because the sheet itself is tilted, because the whole shape of the space around it now bends gently toward the center, and the marble is only following the curve that was always there, the way water follows a slope without being asked to, without needing permission, without needing to travel across some separate invisible channel to be told which way is down. This is closer, though still imperfect, to what gravity is. Not a rope thrown across the void. Not a whisper carried from one mass to another. But the shape of the void itself, curved by the presence of something heavy resting within it. And so when we ask how gravity escapes the black hole, we are, in a way, asking the wrong question, gently, the way one might ask how the shadow escapes the tree, when really the shadow was never separate from the tree at all. It was always simply the shape the light takes when it meets something solid enough to block its path. The black hole does not need to send its gravity outward, the way a lantern sends its light outward into the dark. The black hole simply is a place where space itself has been bent so severely, so completely, that the bending itself reaches outward, the way a footprint reaches outward from a foot long after the foot has lifted away, the shape remaining even when the cause has moved on, even when the moment has passed. Space, far from the black hole, is still curved by its presence, gently, the way the surface of a still pond is curved for a long moment after a stone has already sunk to the bottom, the ripples still moving outward across the water's skin, still carrying the memory of that single disturbance, long after the stone itself has come to rest, unseen, in the dark below. This is what we mean when we say gravity does not need to escape. The curvature was already there. It did not have to leave the black hole and travel across the emptiness to reach you the way light must leave a star and travel for years, for centuries, for millennia to arrive at last in the quiet dark of your window. The curvature simply exists, spread across space like a slow and permanent hush, the way cold exists around a block of ice without needing to be sent, without needing to be delivered, simply radiating outward as a fact of what is there. And so somewhere out there, tonight, near the edge of some vast and lightless place we may never see with our own eyes, space itself bends in silence, and that bending reaches gently outward, farther than light ever could, not because it moves faster, not because it breaks some hidden law, but because it was never traveling in the first place. It was only ever the shape of the dark itself, quietly declaring, without words, without light, without any need to be seen at all, that something enormous is resting there, deep in the folds of the universe, the way a great weight might rest for centuries at the bottom of a lake, unseen by any eye, and yet still shaping, ever so slightly, the slow and patient way. The water settles around a stone long since gone still, long since surrendered to the dark below it, and yet somehow, in its own quiet manner, still touching the surface far above, still felt in every gentle ripple that moves outward toward the shore. Let yourself rest in that image a little longer. Let it become less an idea and more a texture, something you can feel along the edges of your mind the way you feel the weight of a blanket without needing to look down and confirm it is there. Space itself, curved. Not sending, not reaching, not traveling. Simply shaped, the way a valley is shaped by a river that carved it long ago and then moved on, leaving behind only the low and patient contour where water once passed, a contour the rain still remembers, a contour every future stream will follow without ever needing to be told why. This is the strange gentleness hidden inside something as violent, as absolute, as a black hole. We speak of it in the language of collapse, of crushing, of an end so total that even light cannot outrun it. And yet the gravity it leaves behind is not violent at all. It is quiet. It is patient. It is closer to memory than to force, closer to the hush that lingers in a room after someone has left it than to the slamming of a door. Consider, if it helps you drift a little further from the shore of waking thought, that every mass in the universe does this in some small way. Not only the black hole, vast and lightless and folded impossibly upon itself, but also the moon, pale and familiar, hanging patiently above you even now. The moon does not reach down across the dark and pull the tide toward itself. The moon simply rests within the fabric of space, and the fabric bends gently beneath it, and the ocean, vast and unknowing, slides along that bend the way a marble slides along the curve of a bowl, unaware that it is being guided, only aware, if it could be aware at all, that this is simply the direction the world leans tonight. You, too, rest within a curve. The earth beneath you is not holding you down with some invisible hand. It is simply heavy enough, simply massive enough, to have bent the space around itself into a shape that happens to cradle you, gently, the way a hammock cradles a sleeping body without needing to grip it, without needing to hold on, only shaped correctly enough that staying is easier than leaving. You are not being pulled toward the earth tonight. You are resting in a curve the earth has made, the way a marble rests in the lowest point of a bowl, not because the bowl desires the marble's presence, but because there is simply nowhere else nearby for the marble to be. This is, perhaps, one of the quietest truths tucked inside modern physics, that falling is not a form of being taken, but a form of following. The apple does not fall because the earth summons it. The apple falls because space near the earth is tilted just enough that falling is the only path left that makes sense, the way water does not choose the valley out of longing, but only because there is no other way to be true to the shape of the land. And so, whether we speak of a marble in a bowl, or a moon above a tide, or the enormous silence resting at the heart of a black hole, we are always speaking of the same soft principle, repeated at every scale, whispered in every corner of the cosmos. That mass bends space, and space, once bent, tells everything nearby, gently, wordlessly, which direction is now easiest to move in. Gravity, then, is less a force reaching outward and more an instruction written quietly into the shape of the world itself, an instruction that does not need to travel because it was never separate from the space it lives in. The black hole does not send this instruction across the void the way a lighthouse sends its beam across dark water. The black hole simply is a place where the instruction has become so severe, so folded, so absolute, that anything crossing too near it finds every possible path leading only inward, the way every hallway in some vast and ancient house might lead, no matter which door you choose, only deeper into its silence. And light, unable to disobey the shape of the space it moves through, simply follows that instruction to its end, the way a river follows a canyon it did not choose, carved long before by forces far older than itself, arriving finally at a place from which no path leads back out again, no matter how patiently, how endlessly, how quietly it searches for one, turning and turning in the dark, the way. A leaf might turn in a slow current long after it has given up any hope of reaching the shore it once knew, circling instead in some quiet eddy, patient, weightless, undemanding of the water that holds it. Let that image rest with you now. Let it settle the way silt settles at the bottom of a river once the current has finally grown still. There is no need to follow it further tonight. There is only the need to notice it, softly, and then let it go, the way you might notice a single star out of thousands, and then allow your gaze to drift onward without needing to name it, without needing to hold it fixed in place. Because tonight we are not only speaking of light and gravity as separate travelers on separate roads. We are speaking, too, of time, that quiet river we so rarely think to question, the one we assume moves at the same gentle pace everywhere. For everyone, the way we assume the tide will always be the tide, the way we assume the dark outside your window is the same dark that rests over every other window in the world at this very moment. But it is not. Time itself bends, the way space bends, the way that bedsheet dips beneath the weight of a single heavy stone. And near a black hole, time does something almost impossible to hold steady in the mind without drifting. It slows and slows and slows again, the closer one comes to that edge of no return we call the event horizon. Imagine, if it eases you further into stillness, a clock resting near that boundary, ticking. To the clock itself, nothing feels strange at all. Each second follows the last the way it always has, calm, familiar, unhurried. But to someone watching from far away, from the safety of ordinary space, that same clock would appear to slow, its ticking stretching longer and longer, each second taking a little more time to arrive than the one before it, the hands moving as though wading through something thicker than time should ever be, the way a voice grows slower and deeper when a recording is stretched gently across more time than it was ever meant to fill. And if that clock continued forward, closer still, approaching the horizon itself, The observer far away would watch its ticking stretch on longer than a lifetime, longer than the patience of stars themselves, the final tick approaching but never quite arriving, not within any span of watching that a human heart could endure, the image of the clock fading softly instead, like a voice trailing off into sleep, becoming dimmer, redder, quieter, the light itself stretched into wavelengths too long, too slow, too weary to carry the message any further outward into the dark. This is not a flaw in our instruments. It is not a trick of perspective. It is the shape of time itself responding to the shape of space, the two no longer separate threads but one single fabric, spacetime, bending together the way two hands might fold into each other in sleep, indistinguishable after a while, one warmth rather than two. And so, in this strange and gentle geometry, gravity is not merely a matter of which direction things fall, but also a matter of how quickly moments themselves are allowed to pass. Near a black hole, the future becomes, in a sense, harder to reach, not because it disappears, but because reaching it requires crossing through a kind of resistance built into the both of space and time together, a resistance that grows heavier the closer one comes to that final edge, the way walking against a rising wind grows harder with every step even though the ground beneath your feet has not changed at all. Perhaps this is why the question that opened our evening together feels so quietly haunting once you let it rest fully in your chest. Why can gravity escape what light cannot? Because gravity was never a traveler crossing that resistance at all. It was already woven into the very geometry that creates the resistance, present at every point in space simultaneously, the way the shape of a valley is present at every point along its length the moment it is carved, without needing to travel from one end to the other to become true. Light, on the other hand, must move through that geometry moment by moment, second by second, wave by patient wave, and near a black hole, that path becomes so twisted, so folded, so steep, that no matter how quickly light travels, and it travels faster than anything else we know, there simply is no longer a way through, the geometry itself curling inward like a question that answers itself simply by refusing, gently, endlessly, to allow any other way out the way. A door might refuse to open not because it is locked against you personally, but simply because the frame around it has warped so completely that the door and the wall have become, in some quiet sense, the same unyielding surface. Rest here a moment. There is no need to press further into the mechanics of it tonight. Only let the shape of the thought settle, the way snow settles without sound onto a field already white, adding depth without announcing its arrival. Let us drift, now, toward the edge itself, that boundary we have circled so many times this evening without quite standing upon it. The event horizon. A name that sounds almost gentle when spoken slowly enough, almost like the edge of a calm sea at dusk, the line where water meets sky and the eye can no longer tell which is which. And in a way, that is not so far from the truth of it. The event horizon is not a wall. It is not a surface you could reach out and touch, not a shell of some solid and gleaming material waiting in the dark. It is simply a boundary in the geometry of space itself, a place where the curve becomes so severe that the outward path, the path that leads back toward starlight and open sky, simply ceases to exist. Nothing marks this boundary the way a fence marks the edge of a field. No sign glows there in warning. If you were to fall gently toward it, and we say this not to frighten you tonight, only to help you feel the strange softness hidden inside something so vast, you might not even notice the moment you crossed it. Locally, in that small and personal bubble of space immediately around you, everything might feel unremarkable. Your breath still your own. The dark still simply dark. It is only from far away, from the safety of some distant and untroubled observer, that the crossing would appear final, complete, absolute, the last flicker of your light stretching thinner and redder and slower until it faded entirely from view, the way a whispered word fades into the hush of a large and sleeping house. This is one of the quiet cruelties, and also one of the quiet mercies, folded into the physics of these places, that the falling itself may feel, for the one falling, almost gentle, almost peaceful, right up until the geometry around them grows so extreme that gentleness itself becomes impossible, that the very stretching of space begins to pull in ways too vast for any small and singular body to hold together. But that stretching lies deeper still, past the horizon, past the edge we are only now beginning to approach in our slow and drifting thoughts tonight. For now, we rest at the boundary itself, softly, the way one might rest at the edge of sleep without quite deciding to cross into it. And here, at this boundary, is where our original question finally reveals its full and quiet shape. Light, attempting to leave this place, moving directly outward, directly away, finds that the geometry itself has curved so completely that outward no longer leads away. Every direction, even the one that once meant escape, now bends back toward the center, the way every hallway in a dream might loop back to the same darkened room no matter which door you choose. Light does not fail to escape because it is too slow, or too weak, or somehow deficient in its nature. Light fails to escape because the very idea of an outward direction has been erased at this boundary, folded so thoroughly into the geometry of the trap that there is nothing left to travel toward. But gravity, resting differently within the fabric of that same geometry, does not need an outward direction to reach you. It does not need a path to walk, because it was never separate from the shape of space to begin with. The curvature that exists at the horizon does not stop at the horizon, the way the dip in a mattress does not stop precisely at the edge of the body resting upon it, but spreads outward gradually, softly, diminishing with distance, the way ripples widen and calm as they move away from the place where a stone first broke the surface of still water. This is why gravity can be felt far beyond the horizon, why a black hole's presence can bend the light of stars behind it, why its quiet pull can guide the slow and ancient orbits of matter circling in the dark long before that matter ever draws close enough to be lost. Gravity was already there. It was always already there, the way the shape of a valley is always already there long before the first drop of rain arrives to trace its familiar path down through the dark and silent hills, waiting, patient, unhurried, for something, anything, to finally follow the shape it has held quietly since it first curved into being. And this is the strange and quiet truth hiding at the center of the question, that gravity was never a force reaching backward from the singularity, was never a hand extending outward from some hidden vault of dense and burning matter. It is not a signal, not a message, not a beam of information trying to escape a prison of infinite density. It is the shape of space itself, and shape does not need to escape anything, because shape was never trapped to begin with. Light is a traveler. Light moves through the fabric of spacetime, obeying its curves, bending where the curves are steep, slowing where the curves deepen, vanishing where the curves fold in upon themselves so completely that no path remains outward, no matter how patient, no matter how fast. But gravity is not a traveler at all. Gravity is the road. And you do not ask how a road escapes itself. You do not ask how a valley climbs out of its own slope. The valley simply continues to be a valley, in every direction, for as long as the land remembers the shape it was given. Picture, if you can, in this drifting quiet, a great dark sheet stretched taut beneath the stars. Not a real sheet, not a real fabric, but a picture the mind can hold when the mathematics grows too vast for words. A heavy sphere rests upon it, and the sheet curves beneath its weight, dipping downward in a slow and graceful hollow. Now take that same sphere and let it collapse, let it fall inward upon itself, smaller and smaller, denser and denser, until it becomes a black hole. The hollow in the sheet does not vanish. It does not lift away. It only deepens, growing steeper and steeper, until near the very center the slope becomes something almost vertical, something almost violent, a well with no visible floor. Light rolling across that sheet, drifting close to the well's edge, is drawn down the incline the way a marble is drawn toward the lowest point of any curve. But close enough to the center, the incline stops behaving like an incline at all. It becomes a wall. It becomes a one-way door built from geometry itself. and no marble, however swift, however brilliant, can climb backward up a wall that curves in on every side without ever curving back out again. This is the horizon. This is the edge past which the sheet folds so completely that outward, in any meaningful sense, no longer exists as a direction you could travel toward. And yet, here is where the wonder deepens rather than resolves. The curve of the sheet does not begin at that terrible edge. It begins long before it, far out in the calm and ordinary reaches of space, in the gentle dip that a single grain of stellar dust might not even notice as it drifts along its slow and ancient orbit. The slope is there in the outer dark the same way it is there at the horizon's edge, only shallower, softer, kinder, but it is the same slope, unbroken, continuous, one single unbroken curve stretching from a star 1,000 light-years away all the way down into a place where even geometry seems to hold its breath. So when we ask why gravity escapes and light does not, we are, without quite meaning to, asking the wrong kind of question, the way one might ask why the valley refuses to release the shape of itself into the sky, when the valley was never holding anything captive at all. It was simply being what it has always been. Gravity outside the horizon is not information trying to escape a sealed vault. It is spacetime itself, out here, in the region we still call the rest of the universe, quietly wearing the shape that the collapsed star gave it. You are not receiving a whisper from within the horizon. You are standing, however distantly, however safely, upon the very same curve that the horizon is only the deepest fold of. There is no wall between you and that curvature, because the curvature was never something separate to build a wall around. It is the ground beneath everything. And perhaps this is why the black hole feels less like a monster and more like a monument. Not a devourer reaching out with grasping, hungry hands, but a shape, ancient and total, holding its silence at the center of a much larger and much gentler slope that touches everything around it without pulling any of it in. The star that orbits 1,000 astronomical units away is not being chased. It is simply resting in a hollow so vast and so gradual that a human lifetime could not measure the curve of its fall. It orbits the way a leaf orbits the slow spiral of a drain long before the water quickens, long before the center becomes anything more than an idea drawn faintly across the surface of the pond, and it is only when we search closer, only when we press nearer to that terrible depth, that we begin to understand what the whole shape was quietly built around, patiently, for eons, in a silence that space has never once broken. And only then do we begin to sense the weight that has been resting quietly beneath all of it, all along, unseen and unspoken, like a held breath older than the stars that circle it. Consider the light itself, that patient traveler, moving outward from some distant, ordinary star, indifferent to the darkness gathering far ahead of it. Long before that light ever approaches the curve of a black hole, it begins to feel the gentle suggestion of the slope, not a sudden slowing, not a violent redirection, but the faintest bending, the barest persuasion, the kind of nudge that could almost be mistaken for nothing at all. This is what astronomers call gravitational lensing, and it is one of the quietest, most exquisite proofs that gravity reaches out across distances that seem, at first, impossibly vast. A photon leaving a galaxy far behind a black hole does not vanish into that darkness. It merely bends around it, tracing the curve the way water traces the smooth stone it passes, arriving at our eyes bent, stretched, sometimes even split into faint duplicate arcs of light, a signature written across the sky by geometry alone, with no need for anything to escape from anywhere at all. This is the strange gift hidden inside the mathematics, that a black hole, this deepest and most silent well in the fabric of space, can make itself visible not through what it emits, but through what it bends. Astronomers have watched this bending for decades, mapping faint rings of light called Einstein rings, curling around unseen masses like halos drawn by an invisible hand. And each of these rings is a kind of quiet confession from the universe itself, a confirmation that mass does not need to speak to be heard, does not need to send light outward to be known, because its influence was already written into the space surrounding it, the moment it came to exist. And here, drifting in the hush of that thought, we begin to understand why the black hole is not truly a void in the way imagination first paints it, not an emptiness, but an excess, an abundance of curvature so complete that light itself is folded into its architecture. The horizon is not a wall built to keep something in. It is simply the last visible line where the slope becomes too steep for light to trace its way back out, the way a valley might grow so narrow and so deep near its lowest point that even sound forgets how to climb the way it came. Beyond that last visible line, space-time does not stop existing. It does not become some other kind of substance, some forbidden material outside the reach of physics. It merely continues curving more and more steeply until, at the very center, at the singularity itself, the equations of general relativity quietly, humbly, admit they no longer know how to describe what is happening there. This is one of the great and honest confessions of modern physics, that inside the horizon, our finest description of gravity begins to falter, the curvature growing so extreme that space and time themselves seem to unravel into something our current equations cannot yet hold. Some theorists imagine a point of infinite density, a singularity where all the stars' collapsed mass gathers into a single dimensionless whisper. Others suspect that quantum mechanics, when finally woven completely into gravity's grand design, will reveal something gentler, a tiny frozen kernel, a Planck-scale core, some structure too small and too strange for our present tools to see. But out here, drifting safely beyond the horizon, none of that uncertainty touches us. Out here, gravity behaves exactly as Einstein's geometry predicted a century ago, curving planets into their orbits, bending starlight into soft arcs, guiding galaxies through their slow, magnificent turning. It is only at the very heart of the well that our understanding grows quiet, humbled by a darkness too complete for our present language. And so we return, again and again, to this feeling that the black hole is less a destroyer and more an unanswered question given form, a place where the universe has written something so deep and so total that even light, the fastest and most far-reaching messenger we know, cannot carry the answer back to us. And yet space around it continues on exactly as it always has, curving gently, generously, allowing planets, dust, comets, and starlight to move within its influence without ever needing to know what lies at the center of the shape guiding them. This is the strange and quiet peace hidden within the mathematics, that we do not need to understand everything about the deepest well to understand the slopes surrounding it, the way a sailor does not need to know the ocean floor to read the currents drifting above it, the way we do not need to solve every mystery of a mountain to feel, unmistakably, the pull of its shadow stretching long and slow across the valley floor as the sun sinks low behind it, painting a stillness so vast that even thought begins to slow, drifting downward, unhurried, into the deepening dark where a single question waits patiently to be asked again. What is gravity, really, when everything else has fallen so silent around it? We have called it a curve. We have called it a slope, a valley, a shape pressed into the fabric of space by the presence of mass. And these images are not decorations laid over the truth to make it easier to hold in a tired and drifting mind. They are, in a very real sense, the truth itself, as close as language can come to the equations Einstein wrote more than a century ago, equations that replaced an older, simpler story, the story Newton told of gravity as an invisible thread stretching between any two objects with mass, pulling them together across empty space as if by some silent, instant agreement. Newton's gravity worked well enough to send spacecraft to the moon, well enough to predict the tides, well enough to hold the ordinary architecture of the solar system together in our imagination for 200 years. But it could not explain why light, which has no mass at all, should bend around a star. It could not explain the faint, stubborn drift in the orbit of Mercury, a whisper of motion too small for Newton's thread to account for. And it could not explain what happens at the heart of a collapsing star, where mass grows so concentrated that the old idea of a pulling force quietly breaks apart under its own weight. Einstein's answer was stranger and, somehow, more intimate. He proposed that mass and energy do not reach out across space to pull on distant objects. Instead, they shape the space around them, bending it the way a heavy weight bends a stretched and yielding surface, and it is this bending, this curvature, that guides everything nearby, planets and photons alike, along paths that only look like attraction from far away. A planet orbiting a star is not being pulled toward it. It is simply following the straightest possible path available to it through a space that has been curved by the star's presence, the way a marble rolling across a warped table does not choose to circle the table's low point out of desire, but only because that circling path is the most natural, least resistant motion the warped surface allows. Gravity, in this telling, is not a force at all in the old sense. It is geometry, quietly written into the dark, guiding motion the way a riverbed guides water without needing to touch a single drop. And this reimagining changes everything about the question we began with tonight, drifting here in the calm and endless dark. If gravity is not a force reaching outward from a source, but the very shape of the space through which all things move, then a black hole's gravity was never something needing to escape its horizon in the first place. It did not begin inside the black hole and struggle outward against some cosmic wall. It is written into the space surrounding the black hole, at every distance, as one continuous curve, the way the low, wide slope of a mountain's foot is written into the same stone as its highest, sharpest peak. You do not stand at the mountain's base and ask how the peak's shape has slipped down to reach you. You simply recognize that the mountain, in its entirety, from base to summit, is one unbroken form, and you are standing on a part of that form just as surely as any climber standing higher upon its shoulders. This is why physicists so often insist, with a kind of hushed and careful precision, that gravity is not something a black hole emits, the way a star emits light or a furnace emits heat. It is something a black hole is, in the same way its horizon is something it is, in the same way its terrible density at the center is something it is. Mass curves spacetime. That curvature does not require permission to exist beyond the horizon, because the horizon is simply the place where that same continuous curvature becomes too extreme for anything, even light, to climb back out of it. Everywhere else along that curve, 1,000 miles out, 1,000 astronomical units out, 1,000 light-years out, thinning ever so slowly into the ordinary calm of interstellar space, gravity is simply present, the way the coolness of a winter night is present in a room long before you ever step close enough to the frosted window to feel it sharply against your skin. And so, drifting here in the hush of this long and quiet unraveling, perhaps the deepest comfort in this answer is not merely that it solves an old and puzzling question, but that it reframes the black hole itself, not as a hungry singularity reaching outward with grasping, invisible arms, but as the deepest point of a shape that has always included you, always included the star you orbit, always included the quiet corner of the universe you happen to call home, each of you resting somewhere, along the same vast, curving descent, long before any of you drew near enough to feel its full and terrible weight. And this is where the mind, drifting further into the dark, begins to wonder about time itself, and how it too bends beneath the same quiet weight that bends the paths of light and stone. Because gravity, in Einstein's telling, does not curve space alone. It curves time as well, weaving the two together into a single fabric physicists call spacetime, a fabric in which the passing of a second is not the same everywhere, is not some fixed and universal rhythm ticking identically for every observer no matter where they stand. Time moves slightly slower near a massive object than it does far away from one. A clock resting near the base of a mountain ticks, ever so slightly, more slowly than a clock resting at its summit. A clock aboard a satellite, drifting high above the Earth, ticks slightly faster than a clock resting on the surface beneath it, and this difference, impossibly small as it seems, has to be calculated and corrected for with exquisite precision every single day, or else the satellites that guide our ships and planes and quiet midnight phones would drift out of alignment with the ground beneath them within hours. This is not a metaphor. This is not a poetic flourish laid over the truth to make it easier to hold. It is measured, verified, confirmed again and again by clocks so precise they can detect the passage of time changing across the height of a single staircase. And if this is true in the gentle curvature surrounding our small and ordinary planet, imagine what becomes of time near the edge of a black hole's horizon, where the curvature is not gentle at all, where the slope grows steep enough to bend even light back upon itself. Here, time does not merely slow. It stretches, thins, dilates into something almost unrecognizable to an observer watching from a comfortable distance. If you could watch a clock fall toward a black hole's horizon, safely, from far away, through some impossible telescope built only for thought experiments, you would never actually see it cross that final edge. You would watch its hand slow and slow and slow again, the ticking stretching out longer and longer, the light from its face growing dimmer and redder as it climbed back out against that deepening slope, until the clock seemed to freeze at the threshold, forever approaching but never quite arriving, its final tick smeared out across a stretch of time too vast for the universe itself to finish counting. And yet, for the clock itself, for whatever fragile machinery of gears and light might be falling alongside it, nothing would feel slow at all. It would cross the horizon in an ordinary, unremarkable instant, feeling nothing unusual in that particular moment, the way a leaf feels nothing unusual in the particular instant it passes beneath the surface of a pond, even as the light and ripples it leaves behind continue outward long after it has vanished from view. This is one of the strangest gifts hidden inside gravity's geometry, that the same event can look eternally suspended to one observer and utterly ordinary to another, both descriptions equally true, because time itself is no longer a single shared river flowing at one universal pace, but something more like countless separate currents, each shaped by the mass and motion nearby, each valid within its own perspective, none of them lying, none of them wrong. It is a strange kind of comfort, when you sit with it long enough, to understand that even something as seemingly fixed as the ticking of a clock is, in truth, a negotiation with the shape of the space surrounding it, that a moment does not arrive identically for everyone, that the very fabric of now bends and stretches according to the same silent architecture that bends the paths of starlight and stone. Somewhere, near the edge of some quiet, distant black hole, a moment is happening right now that will not finish happening, from our perspective, for a length of time longer than recorded history, longer than the age of every civilization that has ever risen and dimmed upon our small and drifting world, and yet, from within that moment itself, nothing strange is happening at all. It is simply passing, the way any moment passes, unremarkable and whole. And perhaps this, more than anything, is the quiet secret folded into gravity's geometry, that the horizon is not merely a boundary in space, a line drawn somewhere out in the dark past which light cannot return. It is a boundary in time as well, a place where the future, as we understand it, stretches so thin that it seems to lose its shape entirely, becoming something the rest of the universe can approach and wonder at, but never quite finish watching unfold, the way a held breath might stretch on forever in memory, even after the room itself has long since fallen still and dark and quiet around it. And so we return, gently, to the question that gravity itself seems to whisper into the dark. How is it that gravity escapes when nothing else does? How is it that the same curvature which bends light into silence, which holds photons captive in a horizon of pure geometry, allows its own influence to reach out, untouched, into the space beyond? The answer, when it comes slowly, the way truth often does in physics, not as a bolt of insight but as a shift in what we thought we were asking. Because gravity, in this telling, was never a signal trying to leave the black hole at all. It is not a message sent outward from some point deep inside the horizon, straining against the pull of its own source. It is not like a photon, born in darkness, hurling itself toward a boundary it cannot cross. Gravity, in the language of general relativity, simply is the shape of space itself. And that shape does not need to escape from anything, because it was never trapped to begin with. Think of it this way, if it helps to think in pictures before the mind grows too heavy with equations. Imagine the black hole not as an object sitting inside the universe, radiating some invisible pull outward like a stone humming with force, but as a kind of permanent bend in the fabric that all of us, planets, starlight, the slow drift of galaxies, are already resting upon. The curvature does not travel from the black hole to you. It is simply the condition of the space between you and it, existing everywhere at once, encoded in the geometry itself, long before your presence gives it any particular meaning. This is the strange gift of Einstein's vision, the one that took the old Newtonian picture of gravity, force reaching invisibly across the void, instantaneous, mysterious, and replaced it with something quieter and more patient. Mass and energy tell space how to curve, and space, in turn, tells mass and energy how to move. There is no messenger required, no signal that needs to cross a horizon. The mass of the black hole has already left its imprint on the shape of the universe around it, the way a sleeper's weight leaves its imprint in a mattress long before anyone measures the dent. And so when a planet far outside the horizon feels itself pulled, however faintly, toward the black hole's gravity, it is not receiving some ongoing outward broadcast that has to fight its way past the point of no return. It is simply following the curve that was always there, shaped by the mass long ago, extending outward not through space but as space, already present in every direction, already written into the geometry the planet finds itself moving through. This is why physicists sometimes say that gravity, unlike light, is not trying to escape at all. It never needed permission to leave. The horizon that seals away photons seals away things that must travel through spacetime, things with a path, a direction, a journey to make. But the gravitational field is not traveling. It is the terrain itself, the very stage on which travel becomes possible. To ask how gravity escapes a black hole is a little like asking how the valley escapes the mountain that shaped it. The valley was never inside the mountain, waiting to get out. It is simply the consequence of the mountain's shape, spread outward across the land, present wherever there is land to be shaped at all. Of course, there is a subtlety worth sitting with here, in this quiet hour when subtleties feel less like puzzles and more like companions. If a black hole were to lose mass, say, through the slow, whispering process of Hawking radiation, evaporating over unimaginable stretches of time, its gravitational field would have to change too, somewhere, eventually. Even geometry, patient as it is, cannot stay perfectly fixed if the thing shaping it is dissolving into radiation at the edges. And so gravity does, in its own way, carry information outward. Not urgently, not as some fast signal outrunning light, but through the gentle propagation of curvature itself, which, like light, cannot move faster than the universe's own speed limit. Gravitational waves, we now know with certainty, ripple outward at exactly that pace, the same pace as light, no faster, no slower, confirmed by detectors on Earth sensitive enough to feel space itself flex by less than the width of a proton. So gravity does not defy the great cosmic speed limit. It simply doesn't need to race against it in the way light does at the horizon, because the imprint of the black hole's mass on the space around it was already made, already settled into the curvature long before, propagating outward across the eons like ripples in a pond that formed the moment the stone first touched the water's surface, not something still trying to leave the depths, but something that left its mark the instant it arrived. And perhaps this is the strange comfort tucked inside the mathematics, that the black hole, for all its darkness, for all the light it holds prisoner within its boundary, cannot hide the simple fact of its own mass from the universe around it. The horizon may seal away photons, seal away matter, seal away the future of anything that falls too far inward. But it cannot seal away gravity's oldest secret, the shape it has already given to the world, the imprint already pressed into the fabric long before the boundary ever formed at all. Which means that everywhere you stand, everywhere you have ever stood, you are already resting inside the gravitational history of every mass that came before you. Starlight long extinguished, stars long since collapsed, their curvature still lingering in the space around you like the last note of a song whose instrument fell silent centuries ago. There is something almost tender in this thought, if you let it settle rather than rushing past it. The universe remembers mass the way a room remembers the shape of furniture long after it has been moved away. A faint indentation in the carpet, a patch of wall slightly less faded than the rest. Gravity is memory-made geometry. And so even a black hole, sealed and silent, keeps speaking in the only language it has left, a language made not of light but of shape, not of signal but of structure, pressed so deeply into the fabric of space that no horizon, however absolute, can call it back. Let this thought stretch outward now, the way a slow tide stretches across a darkened shore. Because if gravity is simply geometry, if it is not a force reaching across a distance but the very distance itself, curved and folded by the presence of mass, then the black hole is not really pulling anything toward it at all. Nothing is being summoned. Nothing is being dragged. Things are simply following the straightest path available to them, in a space that has been bent so severely that even the straightest path curves inward, spiraling gently, patiently, toward the place where space runs out of room to bend any further. This is the strange piece hidden inside general relativity, the piece of surrender, not to a force, but to shape. A comet falling toward a black hole is not fighting anything. It is not straining against some invisible leash. It is moving, as everything in the universe moves, along the path of least resistance, the geodesic, the graceful line that requires no push and no pull, only the quiet acceptance of the geometry it finds itself inside. Even a plunge into oblivion, seen this way, is not violence. It is simply obedience to a shape too vast for any single traveler to perceive from within. And yet, this obedience takes on a haunting cast the closer that traveler drifts toward the horizon, because the geometry itself begins to warp in ways that stretch the ordinary meaning of words like forward and toward. Nearer the black hole, the very shape of causality tilts, as though the compass of the universe were slowly being turned on its side. Whereas once, far from the horizon, moving forward in time and moving forward in space were separate freedoms, you could choose your path through space while time simply carried you along regardless. Nearer the horizon these freedoms begin to merge, to fold into one another, until the boundary itself marks the place where the future, quite literally, becomes a direction in space rather than a direction in time. This is not poetry alone. It is written plainly into the mathematics, in the strange behavior of the metric as it approaches the Schwarzschild radius, where the roles of the radial coordinate and the time coordinate quietly trade places. Outside the horizon, you can choose to move closer to the black hole or farther away. That choice belongs to you, a matter of space, of will, of engines and trajectories. But inside the horizon, that choice dissolves. Moving toward the singularity becomes as unavoidable as moving forward into next Tuesday. It is no longer a place you travel to. It is a moment you cannot help but arrive at, the way all of us are carried helplessly into tomorrow whether we wish it or not. Perhaps this is why black holes feel less like objects and more like verbs, not a thing sitting in space, but a process unfolding in time, an inevitability given shape, a future collapsed into geometry so completely that it becomes indistinguishable from a place. To fall inside is not to travel somewhere forbidden. It is to have your future rewritten so that somewhere forbidden becomes simply the only shape that time can take. And still, from outside, none of this urgency is visible. From outside, everything appears to slow, to stretch, to hover at the threshold, forever arriving and never quite arriving, as if the universe itself were holding its breath at the edge of an event it cannot bear to finish watching. This is the strange doubling that black holes offer us. One story told in the reference frame of the falling traveler, swift and total and absolute, and another story told in the reference frame of the distant observer, slow and suspended and eternal, each equally true, each equally faithful to the mathematics, neither one lying, both of them simply describing the same event from geometries so different they might as well belong to separate universes. It is tempting, lying here in the dark, letting these thoughts drift like slow clouds across some inner sky, to ask which version is the real one, the swift fall or the eternal freeze, but perhaps that question itself carries the wrong shape. Perhaps. The truer lesson is that reality was never obligated to offer us a single vantage point from which everything makes sense at once. Perhaps the universe simply does not owe us a view from nowhere, a godlike accounting that reconciles every observer into one tidy narrative. Perhaps it only owes us consistency, that each observer, faithful to their own frame, their own falling or their own watching, will find a story that holds together, even if it never quite matches the story being told a few miles away, or a few moments away, or a few heartbeats away, across the invisible seam of the horizon. This is not a flaw in the theory. It is, if anything, one of its quietest triumphs, that general relativity does not ask the falling traveler and the distant witness to agree, only to be internally whole, each within their own geometry, each within their own slice of spacetime. The traveler falling through the horizon feels nothing unusual in that instant, at least for a black hole large enough that tidal forces remain gentle. No flash, no wall, no visible boundary marking the transition. Only the slow, imperceptible tightening of geometry around them, like a coat sewn so gradually snug that the wearer never notices the moment it stopped fitting loosely. And yet, for the observer left behind, watching from far off, that same traveler seems to freeze at the threshold forever, their image dimming, redshifting, stretching into an ever fainter echo of themselves, approaching the horizon in an infinite, asymptotic hush that never technically arrives, even as, in the traveler's own experience, arrival comes and goes in a matter of seconds. It is worth sitting inside this asymmetry a while longer, not rushing past it, because it holds one of the strangest gifts relativity offers the imagination. The idea that time is not a single river flowing at the same pace for everyone, but something closer to a landscape, full of valleys and slopes, where some paths pass swiftly through the lowlands of curvature and others linger, stretched thin across some vast highland the traveler cannot perceive from where they stand. Gravity does not simply pull. It also shapes duration itself, slows the ticking of clocks nearer to greater masses, a phenomenon called gravitational time dilation, confirmed not only in the extremes of theory but in the quiet, mundane precision of satellites orbiting our own Earth, their onboard clocks nudged forward year after year to correct for the fact that time genuinely does move faster for them, farther from our planet's gentle well of gravity, than for us, resting here beneath its deeper curve. Now imagine that gentle nudging pushed to its absolute limit, magnified across a boundary where curvature does not merely bend time's pace but bends its very direction. This is what waits at the black hole's edge, not an exotic exception to the rule, but rather its natural, terrifying conclusion. Time dilation, stretched far enough, does not simply slow a falling clock. It begins to redefine what falling even means, until the distinction between moving through space and moving through time collapses entirely into a single motion, a single inevitability, indistinguishable from an arrow already loosed and already traveling toward its target. And so we return, again and again in this long meditation, to the horizon as a kind of frontier not merely of place but of possibility, the last address at which two observers can still, in principle, exchange a signal, still send a photon back and forth, still remain, however faintly, in conversation with one another. Past that threshold, conversation is not simply difficult. It is structurally, geometrically impossible, not because of distance, not because of time, but because the very notion of back no longer exists as a direction available to try. There is something almost unbearably intimate about this, if you let yourself feel it rather than merely understand it. Two travelers, perhaps once close, perhaps once bound by nothing more than the ordinary bonds of curiosity or care, could drift toward such a boundary together, and one could cross while the other remained just outside, and in that single crossing an entire universe of difference would open between them. Not a gulf of miles, which could still, in principle, be closed by patience and propulsion, but a gulf of causal possibility, a gulf built not from space but from the fundamental architecture of what can and cannot ever again reach the other. This, perhaps, is the quiet ache tucked inside so much of black hole physics, that its strangest truths are never really about black holes at all, but about connection, about the fragile, contingent geometry that allows 2 points in the universe to remain in touch with one another, to send light, to send warmth, to send meaning across the dark. Black holes simply reveal, in their extremity, what was always true in gentler forms throughout the cosmos, that connection is not guaranteed by nearness, that presence is not guaranteed by proximity, that some boundaries, once crossed, close not with violence but with a terrible, silent finality that leaves no mark upon the crossing itself, only upon everything that follows it. Stretching outward into a future the other side can no longer share, no longer witness, no longer reach, no longer touch, no longer hold in the mind's eye as anything other than memory. And memory, it turns out, may be the truest currency the universe deals in, once causality itself draws its curtain. For everything that crosses beyond reach becomes, from that moment onward, a kind of story rather than a presence, something that happened, rather than something that continues to happen alongside you. The traveler who falls beyond the horizon does not stop existing, not in any way physics can rightly claim. They simply stop being available to the rest of the universe as a participant, and become, instead, a chapter already written, sealed, and set gently upon a shelf that no future conversation can reopen. This is perhaps why so many who study these strange geometries speak of black holes not merely in the language of astrophysics, but in the hushed cadences usually reserved for grief, for parting, for the particular ache of watching someone drift out past the edge of what can still be shared. Not because black holes are sad, exactly. The universe does not seem to traffic in sadness the way we do, does not seem to mourn its own architecture, but because the shape of the horizon mirrors something achingly familiar to any being that has ever loved something it could not keep pace with, could not follow, could not call back across a threshold quietly closing. And yet, there is a strange dignity folded into this too, if you sit with it long enough in the dark. Because nothing is lost in the way our instincts fear. Information, physicists now largely agree, after decades of argument, after Stephen Hawking himself once wagered otherwise and later conceded the wager, is not truly destroyed by a black hole, even if the manner of its preservation remains one of the deepest unresolved riddles in modern theoretical physics. Whatever falls inward, whatever crosses that silent boundary, seems in some way to leave an imprint that persists, encoded perhaps upon the horizon itself, in patterns almost too subtle for our current mathematics to fully decode, patterns some theorists compare to a hologram, where the full three-dimensional richness of what fell inward might somehow be written upon the flat, two-dimensional skin of the boundary that swallowed it. This idea, radical as it once seemed, now sits at the center of some of the most promising work in fundamental physics. This notion that the horizon is not merely a boundary of loss, but potentially a kind of ledger, a surface inscribed with the history of everything that has ever crossed it, encoded not in the shapes we're used to imagining information taking, but in whatever way the microscopic degrees of freedom of spacetime allow. If true, it would mean that a black hole, hidden and dark and silent as it seems, might be one of the most thoroughly documented objects in the universe. Its interior turbulence, its collapsed histories, its vanished travelers, all somehow etched into the shimmering skin of the horizon itself, waiting, patiently, the way old libraries wait, for a language capable of reading them. This should not comfort us too easily, of course. Even if information is preserved, preserved is not the same as returned. A book kept safe on a high shelf is not the same as a book brought back down into your hands. And so, for the traveler who falls beyond the boundary, whatever imprint of them remains inscribed upon the horizon offers little solace to the version of them still, in their own experience, continuing forward, still moving, still falling, still approaching the singularity that waits at the center of this whole geometry like a period at the end of an unfinishable sentence. The singularity itself remains the true edge of our understanding, the place where general relativity, for all its elegance, simply stops giving answers, where curvature does not merely intensify but appears, mathematically, to become infinite, a signal not of some genuine infinite density hiding at the heart of every black hole, but rather of our current theory reaching the limit of what it alone can describe. Most physicists suspect that quantum gravity, some deeper, more complete theory not yet fully written, perhaps drawing threads from string theory or loop quantum gravity or ideas not yet imagined, will eventually replace that infinite singularity with something finite, something strange but describable, some quantum core where spacetime itself behaves in ways we do not yet have language for. But for now, in this era of understanding, the singularity remains a kind of honest silence at the center of the theory, a place where our equations, so precise and confident everywhere else, simply raise their hands and admit they do not know. And there is something oddly comforting in that honesty too. In a universe willing to show us the exact edge of its own explanatory power, rather than papering over that edge with false certainty. The singularity does not mock us for not understanding it. It simply waits, the way all true mysteries wait, patient and dark and utterly indifferent to whether we ever arrive at an answer, content to remain the one place in the cosmos where imagination and mathematics must, for now, walk hand in hand into the dark, unwilling to let go of each other's hand until something clearer waits on the other side. And so, as this long meditation draws toward its own quiet horizon, perhaps it is worth returning to the question that first carried us into this darkness: how gravity escapes what light cannot. By now the answer feels less like a fact to be memorized and more like a truth to be settled into, the way a body settles into sleep. Gravity was never a traveler trying to leave. It is the shape of the road itself, already laid down, already written into the fabric of space long before anything arrived to walk it. Light must move through that geometry, obedient to its curves, and at the horizon, the geometry curves so completely inward that no path remains outward at all. But gravity does not move through space. Gravity is the memory space keeps of mass, imprinted into its very geometry, present everywhere at once, needing no permission, no escape, no journey, only the quiet fact of having been shaped that way from the beginning. Perhaps this is why black holes, for all their violence, all their crushing finality, feel less like monsters in the story of the cosmos and more like punctuation, the places where the universe pauses to show us, in its starkest possible terms, what geometry can do when pushed to its absolute limit. They are not simply destroyers. They are teachers, dark and silent and unbearably patient, showing us that space and time are not the fixed stage we once imagined, but living, bendable, breathing things, capable of folding so far inward that they redefine the very meaning of forward and away, of past and future, of connection and its quiet, irreversible loss. And if you have been drifting through these words as you drift toward sleep, let this final thought settle over you gently, the way night settles over a quiet room. Somewhere out there, impossibly far, a black hole spins in silence, indifferent to our wonder, holding its secrets not out of cruelty but simply because that is the nature of the geometry it wears. Its horizon does not reach for you, does not summon you, does not pull you against your will. It simply exists, faithfully, as the boundary of what light can share, and gravity, old, patient, ever-present gravity, reaches past it not because it broke some rule, but because it never needed a boundary to begin with. It was always already here, folded into the shape of everything, including the small, steady curve of your own body resting now into whatever surface holds you, itself a faint, immeasurable bend in the same vast fabric that holds galaxies, holds neutron stars, holds the improbable light of every star that has ever burned and faded into memory. You are, in this sense, never separate from the story you've been listening to. Your own mass, however small against the scale of black holes and galaxies, still curves the space around you, however faintly, still writes its own quiet imprint into the geometry of the universe, still joins, in its own modest way, the same physics that shapes horizons and holds light captive across unimaginable distances. There is no line separating the cosmic from the intimate here. The same laws that govern the darkest, most extreme objects in existence govern also the gentle pull that keeps you settled against the earth tonight, the same geometry, the same quiet obedience to shape rather than force, the same ancient conversation between mass and space that began long before there were minds able to wonder about it, and will continue long after those minds, one by one, fall silent. So let the black holes spin on, far from here, sealed in their own eternal midnight, keeping their secrets the way old stars keep their light, not withheld, exactly, but simply not yet within reach of understanding. Let the horizon remain what it has always been, not a wall, not a punishment, but a boundary written into the shape of things, the edge where our questions must, for now, learn to rest rather than resolve. And let gravity continue doing what it has always done, quietly, faithfully, without any need for permission or escape, holding the universe together not by pulling it inward, but by giving it a shape gentle enough, curved enough, patient enough, to let everything within it, however briefly, however finally, find a place to come to rest. And perhaps that, in the end, is the last quiet thought worth carrying with you into sleep, that even in a universe capable of holding light prisoner forever, capable of folding time itself into stone, there remains, underneath all of it, a strange and abiding gentleness, the simple, unshakable fact that everything, everywhere, is held.